Hello everybody! Today I'm going to be doing the first video in what I hope is going to be an ongoing series in the future time called Let's Talk. And the first thing we're going to talk about is manga, because I have been reading a metric heck ton of it, and we might as well talk about it because I like it and it's fun. I will say I also didn't plan this video out at all, so we're just going to record and see what happens. So I guess the first thing to talk about is what is manga. Manga is basically Japanese comic books, essentially, that come out in Japan, and then a lot of them have been translated into English and come over here. The animated versions of manga is typically anime, and you've probably seen animes before in your life or are familiar with them. The most common and popular ones that most people I think are familiar with are Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon, which used to be on like Cartoon Network and stuff back in the day. So that's kind of manga. It's divided into two main types that I'm aware of. There's always subgenres and things, but kind of the two big overarching types are shonen manga, which are usually mangas directed at guys and boys, and there's usually more fighting and action and less on like romance and emotional stuff. And then there's shoujo mangas, which are usually directed more towards like the female audience and tend to focus more on the emotion and connections and romance as opposed to fighting and those kinds of storylines. I was really, really huge into manga and anime and one of those weird kids kind of back in middle school and a little bit of elementary school. So I read back in the day a ton of different kinds of stuff. So the stuff I'm going to show you today is just stuff that I've been reading recently or am familiar with, but do bear in mind I have read a ton of things that if you want more recommendations or suggestions, I can definitely give you those. One of the things that I personally really like about manga versus like American comics and books and kind of stuff is that the stories are always I find them to be very unique and very interesting and very different than what you would find in a lot of other kinds of books or comic books. Not that American comics, at least more of the American comics and webcomics that I've been reading recently have started to kind of push the boundaries of what I see a lot of people doing. I always felt like Japan was just doing interesting stuff just kind of from the get-go, and so that was probably what drew me to it, is that the stories are very interesting. And they also tend to be a lot of, have fantastical elements, or almost like science fiction-y kind of elements, which I like a lot more in stories, although I guess I do a decent amount of school story stuff too. I also just think Japan is really interesting, and so that's always fun. So I guess what we're just going to start off with are the handful of books that I happen to own right now, and I can talk about sort of as genre representative. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is Sailor Moon, and along with Sailor Moon is Codename Sailor V, which is the first sort of like prequel series of Sailor Moon, and then Sailor Moon, the manga series, which I picked the second one because Sailor Mercury is my favorite. So Sailor Moon is probably the classic anime or manga series that almost everyone has heard of, and it basically tells the story of Usagi, or Serena, if you're more familiar with that, and she basically becomes a magical girl. This is the quintessential magical girl anime, and she has to save the world and save the princess and find all the Sailor Scouts, and they all have to work together to stop evil, basically. I always really loved Sailor Moon. I think I watched it at a really formative time in my life where I was excited about kick-ass girls who were friends and like wanted to save the universe, and I really liked the magical powers and transformation sequences, and so that's definitely something you get a lot of in here. Sailor Moon is definitely a shoujo manga, but there's a lot of action in it, I would say that, and there's a lot of good fantasy elements and a good mythology, so I definitely think it's super interesting. And then Codename Sailor V, which came out before Sailor Moon, but this is the first time it's been released in America. It's definitely interesting because for a while Sailor Venus is sort of off doing her own thing, so you kind of get to see her storyline, which is cool. The thing that's also good in sort of the fantasy series, and you can't really get away with any video talking about manga if you don't talk about Clamp, which is a 4-person manga group, and they do all kinds of different things. Typically their stuff is really fantasy-based. They did Cardcaptor Sakura, Magic Knights Warriors, Legal Drug, and their most recent series, X 1999, which I really liked, and they never finished, so know that going in. If you start reading X, you're going to be real sad, because it's not done, and I don't think they're ever going to finish it. Their two big and most recent series were XXXholic and Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle, which they both cross over with each other, which is cool. So Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle essentially tells the story of Princess Sakura, who loses all her memories, and this guy Sauron, who says he's going to find them all and save her, basically. They meet up with a couple other people along their journey. And just one of the things that's cool about Tsubasa is if you've read a lot of Clamp work is that there's a lot of characters from the different series that sort of make appearances that aren't themselves, but they're themselves. It's definitely really interesting. One of the things I've always personally really loved about Clamp is they probably have some of the best art that I've ever come across. They have a very distinctive style, and they do a really good job with the coloring, and I like that they don't use a lot of screen tones. Screen tones are sort of like this kind of like backgroundy thing here. They don't use a lot of that in their art, which I like. I actually really like the art of XXXholic, the crossover series for this, a lot more, but I've been reading this plot a lot more. I think the plot's a little more action-adventure in this series. The next type of books that I'm going to talk about are like slice of life mangas, which are probably my absolute favorite in the whole world to read. And so the first one I'm going to talk about, which I've talked about before, is Azumanga Daioh, and Azumanga Daioh is definitely really unique in the sense that the panels is told in strips as opposed to being like pages, you know, that kind of flow together. This is just a story about 6 high school girls that are all friends, and there's 4 volumes, and it talks about their 4 years in high school, and it's really fun and funny and clever, and I just like their friendship, and I like that that's what the focus is. Another like slice of life manga by the same author is Yosuba, and exclamation point. And this is just a story of Yosuba, who is like a 5 or 6-year-old kind of kid, and just her adventures with her father living in Japan and with her friends. This book actually does more of the like showing the panels like in an order as opposed to the straight down panels. And only like this book comes out like once a year in America in English, and it makes me really sad that there isn't more of them all the time. And then the other book I'm going to talk about is Kai's Sweet Home, which may not actually be from Japan. I'm not sure. But this is really cute. It's basically this little kitten gets lost, and this family adopts the kitten. And it's just a story about the kitten living with the family. This one's cool because it's in color, and the art is really cute, and the little kitten's cute. And there's a whole bunch of series of them, and they're all about the cute little cat. And the other series that I'm reading right now that I don't have with me is Orion High School Host Club. It's about basically there's this really fancy, prestigious like prep schooly thing, and there's this like group of like 5 really attractive gentlemen that like run what's called a host club, and so these women will come and they'll hang out with the guys and they'll pay to. I'm not actually sure if a host club is a real thing that they do in Japan, but it's kind of an interesting concept if it's something that they do. And basically there's this one girl character who gets a debt to the host club, and in order to pay it off she basically joins the host club. And it's really funny and it's really interesting as a concept, just like the host club thing. And then they do a lot of stuff about a Japanese school year, like they have sports festivals and cultural festivals and that kind of stuff, which is cool to sort of see how like a Japanese school year. Next thing I'm going to talk about is sci-fi kinds of fantasy sort of series. So probably the biggest sci-fi series that you are familiar with is the Gundam series with like the giant fighting robots, and there's a whole mess of those, so you can definitely find a lot of those. Another sort of sci-fi series I'm going to talk about is Absolute Boyfriend by Yuatse. Basically there's this girl who is lonely, and she gets an offer to order like an online boyfriend, and so she does, and she gets this like free trial with this robot. Basically he's a robot and he's her boyfriend, and there's all these shenanigans, and she accidentally keeps him and owes all this money, and basically anyway it's about that. And I haven't read this entire series. I've read like half of it back in the day, and so I'm excited to start reading it again. But it was an interesting series. Yuatse has really nice art. She does use a lot of screen tones, but I've always kind of been a fan of her people, although they all sort of look like the same characters. If you ever read Fushigi Yugi, which she also did, all the characters kind of look like the characters from that. And other stuff for sci-fi, you know, there's a lot of really good options. It's hard to classify exactly what is sci-fi and what is fantasy anymore, but there's a lot of good stuff there. And the last one I'm just going to talk about, because I love Soulless, is by Gil Carriger, as you all probably know. I also own the manga for Soulless, at least the first volume. The manga is really nicely drawn. Rem is the artist, and she does a great job. And so the first manga volume summarizes the first book, and you really get a good feel of what all the characters are like, and I don't know. It's really fun, and I really liked it. And the first few pages are colored, which is always lovely. So I would definitely recommend checking that out if you haven't read Soulless, or if you've read Soulless. It's just a fun another way to experience it. So that's all the stuff I had planned to talk about in this video, my first Let's Talk video. Hopefully if you liked it, let me know if you liked the format. I can definitely try to be more prepared for it next time to hopefully have some more information. If you definitely want some more, if you've read any of these manga, you know, let me know. We can talk about them in the comments. Or if you want more recommendations for a particular type of genre or subgenre that you're looking for, let me know. Because if I don't know something, I definitely know people that do know something that I read way more than me, so I can certainly point you in the right direction. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you guys are doing great, and I will see you soon. Bye!